everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into what honestly sounds like the completely impossible life of George Muller. We're looking at a guy who built and funded a massive charitable empire back in the 19th century, and here's the kicker. He never asked for a single dime. I mean, think about that for a second. We live in a world where every charity, every startup, and every organization is constantly running fundraising campaigns, right? But Muller? He built an institution that cared for thousands of people, all while flat out refusing to ask anyone for financial support. It's wild. Seriously, how do you even do that? How do you fund an empire without asking for money? Imagine trying to sustain thousands of lives. We're talking providing shelter, food, clothing, education, while relying on literally zero active fundraising. It sounds completely impossible, doesn't it? It basically goes against every rule of economics and just plain common sense that we're taught today. Yet by using this radical method, relying purely on his faith and prayer, Muller didn't just, scrape by. He successfully cared for an astonishing 10,000 orphan children over his lifetime. 10,000. That's 10,000 lives completely transformed. He had to manage enormous sums of money to pull this off, but the way that money actually showed up, well, that's what makes his story one of the absolute most fascinating case studies in history. All right, let's jump into Section 1, the man who never asked. So his one unbreakable rule was this: never solicit donations from the public. Ever. He wouldn't write letters asking for funds, he wasn't hosting fancy fundraising dinners, and he literally wouldn't even drop a hint about his financial needs to wealthy patrons. He relied purely on his deeply held faith that God would provide exactly what was needed, exactly when it was needed. And as we're going to see, he took this rule to the absolute extreme. Section 2. From rebel to believer. Now, before he was this legendary philanthropist trusted with thousands of lives, young George's early life in Prussia looked, radically different. Born in 1805, he was actually known for being pretty dishonest. He lied, he gambled, he spent his time out drinking instead of studying. Get this, he even routinely stole from his own father, who was a government tax collector. But then look at the stark contrast with his adulthood. He becomes this beloved philanthropist and the pastor at Bethesda Chapel in Bristol, England. And this is exactly where his radical financial views kicked in. He actually refused a guaranteed pastoral salary. He chose instead to trust that his needs would be supplied entirely through voluntary, unprompted gifts. So how does a guy go through such a radical transformation? Let's look at the timeline. The real turning point happened in 1825. Muller went to a simple Christian prayer meeting with a friend. Nothing flashy, just reading the Bible and some heartfelt prayers. But he experienced this profound spiritual shift. He left that meeting completely changed, holding on to this deep new conviction. Fast forward to 1829, he moves to England to be a missionary, and then just a few years after that, in 1836, he opens his very first orphan house. Which brings us to Section 3, a heart for orphans. Once he settled in Bristol, Muller saw firsthand the devastating impact the Industrial Revolution was having on the most vulnerable people in society, the kids. The 19th century was just a brutal, brutal time for the poor. Rampant disease and crushing poverty had left countless children totally abandoned on the streets of England. I mean, they had no food, no protection, zero chance at an education. They were essentially the forgotten collateral damage of industrial progress. And Muller felt this direct, urgent calling to step into that heartbreaking gap. So, stepping up to the plate, he opens his first orphan house in Bristol in 1836. And, staying true to his golden rule, he did it with practically no money. But his goal here wasn't just to help them barely survive. He wanted to provide shelter, a Christian education, and practical vocational training. He wanted to set these kids up for real, productive lives. And his orphanages actually quickly became famous, not just because they were huge, but because of their spotless cleanliness, their discipline, and the deep compassion they showed. Let's move to Section 4, the breakfast miracle. To truly wrap our heads around how this living by faith principle actually worked in reality, especially when lives were literally on the line, we have to look at what's known as the breakfast miracle. Okay, picture this. You've got hundreds of children sitting at these long dining tables, empty plates, empty cups. There is zero food in the entire building. So step 1, instead of panicking, Muller gathers the children and prays, thanking God for the food they're about to eat. Food that, remember, does not currently exist in the house. Step 2, there's a knock on the door. It's a local baker. He tells Muller he couldn't sleep the night before, he just had this overwhelming feeling that he needed to bake bread for the orphanage, so he'd been up all night baking. And then, step 3, Right after the bread shows up, a milk cart literally breaks down right outside the orphanage. The milkman has to empty his cart to fix the wheel, so he offers all his milk to the kids before it spoils. Just like that, breakfast is served. I mean, you really can't make this stuff up. For Muller, provisions exactly like that one were direct evidence of his beliefs in action. His mindset was incredibly simple. He said, "Faith does not operate in the realm of the possible. There is no glory for God in that which is humanly possible." He intentionally placed himself in these wild situations where, based on his deep convictions, if God didn't show up, he would just fail completely. Which leads us to Section 5, a global legacy of faith. His local work in Bristol, which eventually became the massive Ashley Down orphan houses, it just exploded into this truly global legacy that outlived him by generations. And the numbers here are absolutely staggering. Through his organization, he built over 120 schools, educating thousands. He distributed millions of Bibles and texts all over the globe. And even after his wife passed away, he didn't slow down at all. Instead, well into his advanced age, he traveled the world preaching to millions across India, Australia, Japan, China, and North America. Plus, he kept these meticulous journals his whole life, reportedly recording over 50,000 specific answers to prayer. 50,000. And many of those instances were documented as happening within hours of him asking. So when you look at his life, there's this fascinating paradox, right? His method was to refuse a fixed salary, do absolutely zero public fundraising, and live a super simple life without ever hoarding personal wealth. He was handling massive fortunes for his charities, but he kept almost nothing for himself. And the outcome? Well, he successfully managed one of the largest charitable ministries of his time, saw thousands of those recorded answered prayers, and left a massive worldwide legacy when he passed away in Bristol at the ripe old age of 92. Thousands of people actually flooded the streets to attend his funeral and honor him. I want to leave you with this really provocative final thought from Muller himself. He said, "The beginning of anxiety is the end of faith, and the beginning of true faith is the end of anxiety." In our modern world, where, let's be honest, anxiety is kind of the default state for so many of us, worrying about our finances, our futures, our security, George Muller's life poses a really radical challenge. Does true faith really mean the end of anxiety? And how could adopting even a fraction of this relentless, trusting mindset completely change how you navigate the impossible challenges in your own life today?